One time when I was blind in a tree, waiting motionless for a game to wander by, I dozed off and fell 10 feet to the ground, landing on my back. It was as if the impact had knocked every wisp of air out from my lungs, and I lay there, struggling to inhale, to exhale, to do anything. That's how I feel now, trying to remember how to breathe, unable to speak, totally stunned as the name bounces around the inside of my skull. Someone is gripping my arm, a boy from Seam, and I think maybe I started to fall and he caught me. There must have been some mistake. This can't be happening. Prim was one slip of paper in thousands, her chances of being chosen so remote that I not even bothered to worry about her. Hadn't I done everything? Taking the trust, refusing to let her do the same? One slip out of thousands. The odds had been entirely in her favor, but it hadn't mattered. Some way far away, I could hear the crowd murmuring unhappily, as they always do when a 12-year-old gets chosen, because no one thinks this is fair. And then I see her, the blood drained from her face, hands clenched into fists at her side, walking with small steps toward the stage, passing me. I still see the back of her blouse has become untucked and hangs over her skirt. This is detail. This detail, the untucked blouse forming the ducktail, that brings me back to myself. Prim! A strangled cry comes from my throat, and my muscles begin to move again. Prim! I don't need to shove through the crowd. The other kids make way immediately, allowing me a straight path to the stage. I reach her, just as she's about to mount the steps. With one sweep of my arm, I push her behind me. I volunteer, I gasp. I volunteer as tribute. There's some confusion on the stage. District 12 hasn't had a volunteer in decades, and protocol has become rusty. The rule is that one tribute's name has been pulled from the ball, another eligible boy, if a name has been read, or girl, if the girl's name has been read, can step forward to take his or her place. In some districts, in which winning the reaping is such a great honor, people are eager to risk their lives. The volunteering is complicated, but in District 12, where the word contribute is pretty much synonymous with the word corpse, volunteers are all but extinct. Lovely, says every trinket, but I believe there's a small matter of introducing the reaping winner and then asking for volunteers, and if one does come forth and we, what does it matter? Says the mayor. He's looking at me with a pained expression on his face. He doesn't know me really, but there's a faint recognition there. I am the girl who brings the strawberries, the girl his daughter might have spoken on occasion, the girl who has 5 years stood huddled with her mother and sister as he presented her, the oldest child, with the medal of valor, the medal for her father, vaporized in the mines. Does he remember that? What does it matter? Let her come forward. Prim is screaming hysterically behind me. She wrapped her skinny arms around my vise. No, Candace, no, you can't go. Prim, let go, I said harshly, because this is upsetting me and I don't want to cry. When they televise the replay of reapings tonight, everybody will make note of my tears. I'll be marked as an easy target. A weakling. I will give no one that satisfaction. Let go. I can feel someone pulling her from my back. I turn and see Gail has lifted Prim off the ground and she's thrashing in his arms. Up you go, Catnip, he says in his voice he's been fighting to keep steady, and he carries Prim off toward my mother. I steel myself and climb the steps. Well, bravo, gushes every trinket. That's the spirit of the games. She pleased to finally have a district with a little action going on in it. What's your name? I swallowed hard. Katniss Evergreen, I said. I bet my buttons that's your sister. Don't want her to steal all the glory, do you? Come on, everybody. Let's give a big round of applause to our newest tribute. Trills every trinket. To the everlasting credit of the people of District 12, not one person claps. Not even the ones holding betting slips, the ones who are usually beyond caring. Possibly because they know me from the hop, or knew my father, or have encountered Prim, who no one can help loving. So instead of acknowledge the applause, I stand there unmoving while they take part in the boldest form of dissent they can manage it. Silence. Which says we do not agree. We do not condone. All of this is wrong. Then something unexpected happens. At least I don't expect it because I don't think District 12 has the place as cares about me. But a shift has occurred since I stepped up to take Prim's place, and now it seems I have become someone precious. At first one, then another, then almost every member of the crowd touches the 3 middle fingers of their left hand to their lips and holds it out to me. It is an old and rarely used gesture of our district, occasionally seen at funerals. It means thanks. It means admiration. It means goodbye to someone you love. Now I am truly in danger of crying, but fortunately Haymack chooses this time to become staggering across the stage to congratulate me. Look at her, look at this one, he hollers, throwing an arm around my shoulders. He's surprisingly strong for such a wreck. I like her, his breath reeks of liquor, and it's been a long time since he bathed. Lots of, he can't think of the word for a while. Spunk, he says confidently, more than you, he releases me and starts from the front of the stage. More than you, he shouts, pointing directly into the camera. Is he addressing the audience, or is he so drunk he might actually be taunting the Capitol? I don't know, because just as he's opening his mouth to continue, Haymack plummets off the stage and knocks himself unconscious. He's disgusting, but I'm grateful. With every camera gleefully trained on him, I have just enough time to release the small choke sound in my throat and compose myself. I put my hands behind my back and stare into the distance. I can see the hills I climbed this morning with Gail. For a moment, I yearn for something, the idea of us leaving the district, making our way into the woods. But I know I was right about not running off, because who else would have volunteered for Prim? Haymack is whisked away from the stretcher, and Alfie Trinket is trying to get the ball rolling again. What an exciting day, she warbles as he attempts to straighten her wig, which has listed severely to the right. But more excitement to come. This time choose our boy tribute. Clearly hoping to contain her teeniest hair situation, she plants one hand on her head as she crosses the ball that contains the boys' names and grabs the first slip she encounters. She zips back to the podium, and I don't even have time to wish for Gail's safety when she reads the name. Peter Millark. Peter Millark. Oh no, I think not him, because I recognize his name, although I have never spoken directly to its owner. Peter Millark. No, the odds are not in my favor today. I watch him as he makes his way toward the stage. Medium height, stocky build, ashy blonde hair that falls in waves over his forehead. The shock of the moment is registering on his face, and you can see his struggle to remain emotionless. But his blue eyes show the alarm I see often in prey. Yet he climbs steadily onto the stage and takes his place. Every trinket asks for volunteers, but no one steps up forward. He has 2 older brothers. I know, I've seen them in the bakery, but one is probably too old now to volunteer and the other won't. This is standard. Family devotion only goes as far for most people on reaping day. What I did was a radical thing. The mayor begins to read the long, dull treaty of treason that, as he does every year at this point, is required, but I'm not listening to a word. Why him, I think. Then I try to convince myself it doesn't matter. Peter Millark and I are not friends, not even neighbors. We don't speak. Our only real interaction happened years ago. He's probably forgotten about it. But I haven't, and I know I never will. It was during the worst time. My father had been killed in the mine accident 3 months earlier in the bitterest January anyone could remember. The numbness of his loss has passed, and the pain would hit me out nowhere, doubling me over, racking my body in sobs. Where are you? I would cry in my mind. Where have you gone? Of course, there was never any answer. The district has given us a small amount of money as compensation for his death, enough to cover 1 month of grieving, at which my mom would be expected to get a job. Only she didn't. She didn't do anything, just sit up in a chair, more often huddled under the blankets on our bed, eyes fixed on some point in the distance. Once in a while she stirred, get up as if moved by some urgent purpose, only then to collapse back into stillness. No amount of pleading from Prim seemed to affect her. I was terrified, supposed now to have a mother locked in some dark world of sadness. But at the time, all I knew was that I had lost not only a father but a mother as well. At 11 years old, when Prim was just 7, I took over as head of the family. There was no choice. I bought our food at the market and cooked it as best as I could and tried to keep Prim and myself looking presentable. Because if it had become known that my mother was no longer cared for us, the district would have taken her away and placed us in a community home. I'd grown up to seeing those home kids at school. The sadness, the marks of angry hands on their faces, the hopelessness as they curled their shoulders forward. I could never let that happen to Prim. Sweet, tiny Prim, who cried when I cried, before she even knew the reason, who brushed and plaited my mother's hair before we left for school, who still polished my father's shaving mirror each night because he hated the layer of coal dust that settled on everything and seam. The community home still would crush her like a bug, so I kept our predicament a secret. But the money ran out and we were slowly starving to death. There's no other way to put it. I kept telling myself if I could hold on until just May 8th, I would turn 12 and be able to sign for Teresa and get that precious grain and oil to feed us. Only 3, and there were still several weeks to go. We could well be dead by then. Starvation not an uncommon fate in District 12. Who hasn't seen the victims? Older people who can't work, children from a family with too many to feed, those injured in the mines, straggling through the streets, and one day you'll come upon them sitting motionless against the wall or lying in the meadow. You'll hear the wails from the house, and the peacemakers are called to retrieve the body. Starvation is never a cause of death officially. It's always the flu or exposure or paranormal, but that fools no one. On the afternoon of my encounter with Peter Millard, the rain was falling in relentless ice sheets. I had been in town trying to trade some threadbare old baby clothes of Prim's in a public market, but there is no takers. Although I had been in the hop on several occasions with my father, I was too frightened to venture into that rough, gritty place alone. The rain had soaked through my father's hunting jacket, leaving me chilled to the bone. For 3 days we had nothing but boiled water with some old dry mint leaves I found in the cupboard. By the time the market is closed, I'm shaking so hard I dropped my bundle of baby clothes in the mud puddle. I didn't pick it up for fear I would keel over and unable to regain my feet. Besides, no one wants those clothes. I couldn't go home because at home was my mother with her dead eyes and my little sister with her hollow cheeks and cracked lips. I couldn't walk into the room with smoky fire from the damp branches I scavenged at the edge of the woods after the coal had run out, my hands empty with any hope. I found myself stumbling along a muddy lane behind the shops that served the wealthiest townspeople. The merchants live above their businesses, so essentially in their backyards. I remember the outlines of garden beds not yet planted for the spring, a goat or 2 in a pen, one sodden dog trying to post, hunched defeated in the muck. All forms of stealing were forbidden in District 12, punishable by death. But it crossed my mind that there might be something in the trash bins, and those were a fair game. Perhaps a bone at the butcher's or rotted vegetables from the grocer's, something known about my family would be desperate enough to eat. Unfortunately, the bins had just been emptied. When I passed the baker's, the smell of fresh bread was so overwhelming I felt dizzy. The ovens were in the back, and golden glow spilled out the open kitchen door. I stood mesmerized by the heat and the luscious scent until the rain inferred, running its icy fingers down my back, forcing me back to life. I lifted the lid to the baker's trash bin and found it spotlessly, heartlessly bare. Suddenly, a voice was screaming at me, and I looked up to see the baker's wife, telling me to move on, and And did I want her to call the peacemakers, and how shocked she was at having those brats from steam pawing through her trash. The worlds were ugly, and I had no defense. As I carefully replaced the lid and backed away, a boy with blonde hair peered out from behind her mother's back, and I seen him at school. He was in my year, but I didn't know his name. He stuck with the town kids, so how would I? His mother went back into the bakery grumbling, but he must have been watching me as I made my way back to the pen and held their pig and leaned against the far side of an old apple tree. The realization that I had nothing to take home had finally sunk in. My knees buckled and I slid down the tree trunk into its roots. It was too much. I was too sick and weak and tired, and oh so tired. Let them call the peacemakers and take us to the community home, I thought. Or better yet, let me die right here in the rain. There's a clatter in the bakery, and I hear the woman screaming again and the sound of a blow, and I vaguely wonder what's going on. Feet slashed toward me through the mud, and I thought, it's her. She's coming to drive me away with a stick. But it wasn't her. It was a boy. In his arms he carried 2 large loaves of bread that must have fallen into the fire because the crusts were scorched black. His mother was yelling, "Feed it to the pig, you stupid creature. Why not? No one decent will buy burned bread." He began to tear the chunks of the burned parts and toss them into the dough. And the front bakery bell rang and the mother disappeared to help a customer. The boy never even glanced my way, but I was watching him. Because of the bread, because of the red wheal that stood out on his cheekbones. What had she hit him with? My parents never hit us. I couldn't even imagine it. The boy took one look back to the bakery as if checking that the close was clear. Then his attention back to the pig. He threw a loaf of bread in my direction. The second quickly followed, and he slashed back to the bakery, closing the kitchen door tightly behind him. I stared at the loaves in disbelief. They were fine, perfect, really, except for the burnt areas. Did it mean for me to have them? He must have, because they were at my feet. Before anyone could witness what had just happened, I shoved the loaves up under my shirt, wrapped the hunting jacket tightly around me, and walked swiftly home. The heat of the bread burned into my skin, but it touched it tighter, clinging to life. By the time I reached home, the loaves had cooled somewhat, but the insides were still warm. When I dropped them on the tables, Prim's hand reached to tear off a chunk, but I made her sit, forced my mother to join me at the table, and poured warm tea. I scraped out the black stuff and sliced the bread. We ate an entire loaf, slice by slice. It was good, hearty bread filled with raisins and nuts. I put my clothes to dry at the fire, crawled into bed, and fell into a dreamless sleep. It didn't occur to me until the next morning that the boy might have burned the bread on purpose. Might have dropped the loaves into the flames, knowing it meant being punished, and then delivered them to me. But I dismissed this. It must have been an accident. Why would I have done it? He didn't even know me. So just throwing me the bread was an enormous kindness that would surely result in beating if discovered. I couldn't explain his actions. We ate slices of bread for breakfast and headed to school. It was as if spring had come overnight. Warm, sweet air, fluffy clouds. At school, I passed a boy in the hall. His cheek was swelled up and his eye was blackened. He was with his friend and didn't acknowledge me in any way. But as I collected Prim and started for home that afternoon, I found him staring at me from across the schoolyard. Our eyes met for only 1 second. Then he turned his head away. I dropped my gaze, embarrassed, and that's when I saw it. The first dandelion of the year. A bell went off in my head. I thought of the hours spent in the woods with my father, and I knew how we were going to survive. To this day, I never shake the connection between this boy, Peter Maillard, and the bread that it gave me hope, and the dandelion that reminded me that I was not doomed. And more than once, I turned into the school hallway and caught his eyes trained on me, only to quickly flit away. I feel like I owe him something, and I hate owing people. Maybe if I thanked him at some point, I'd be less convict like now. I thought about it a couple of times, but the opportunity never came to present itself. And now it never will, because we're going to be thrown in an arena to fight to the death. Exactly how am I supposed to work in a thank you in there? Somehow it just won't even seem sincere if you're trying to slit his throat. The mirror finishes the dreary treaty of treason and motions for Peter and me to shake hands. His are as solid and warm as those loaves of bread. Peter looks at me straight right in the eye and gives my hand what I think was meant to be a reassuring squeeze. Maybe it's just a nervous spasm. We turn back to face the crowd at the anthem of Pyramid Place. Oh well, I think there will be 24 of us. Odds are someone else will kill him before I do. Of course, the odds are not very dependable of late.